What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And this one, I'm going to break down what's going on with the overall market, what you should be watching for moving forward. I'm also going to break down why tomorrow is going to be an absolutely massive day as we have some big bank earnings coming out. And they're going to dictate how the market moves. I'm also going to give you guys some predictions on many of these tickers like Tesla and break down why on earth I do see some upside for the near-term future. Before breaking things down about all of this information, before I talk about what's going on with tomorrow, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, guys, so for the market for tomorrow specifically, we have some very, very interesting stuff coming out. Tomorrow is going to be a very big day because we have some huge earnings dropping. We have JP Morgan Chase, we have United Health, Citi, Wells Fargo, PNC, BlackRock, and a couple of others. The biggest one is going to be, in my opinion, JP Morgan Chase. That's a big one. BlackRock is going to be pretty big too, Wells Fargo as well. But we have some huge earnings coming out. This will dictate how the market does. Now, if the banks do very well, okay, it's not just going to be based off of current earnings. It's going to be based off guidance. Guidance is going to be very, very important. Guidance basically tells us how are the banks expecting to be doing for the next few months, the next few quarters, the next year. That's going to be super important. Make sure you watch that carefully. And then at the same time, if they do well, this is going to dictate the entire finance sector, which is going to dictate SPY and the market for tomorrow, in my opinion. The entire flow of the market is going to be dictated by this. You have to be ready for this. Now, for some data that's dropping at about 10 o'clock a.m. New York time, I know it's different for me because I'm in the West Coast, but for New York time, it's going to be at 10 o'clock a.m. We have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report, the Inflationary Expectations Report, and some very, very big data dropping. You have to be ready for this. This is going to be pretty big for the markets. It's going to cause more volatility moving forward. So be ready for this. This is likely going to be pretty decent because the inflationary expectations tend to be low. So you be ready for this. We're going to see a big move regardless of this anyways. All right, so the big bank earnings are coming. How may they affect the markets? Here's the answer. Now, I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know what's going to happen specifically to SPY, but I do have better insights on other tickers. The reason I say that is because I don't know what the banks are going to report. This is sometimes very hard to predict. But here's what I will tell you. If the banks do well, what does that mean? That means they do well on earnings, they beat on EPS and revenue, for example. But not just that, but we need to see some strong guidance. If the banks are telling us that things are going to be okay for the next quarter, the next 6 months, then the market's going to rip if that happens. If the banks start ripping to the upside, right? If JP Morgan Chase, if Wells Fargo and all these banks do very well, the market's going to rip to the upside. You're going to be watching this pivot point around this 450 area. We have some strong resistance just about here. If we break 450 and start pushing, watch resistance at 450.5 then 451. But if we get above that, we have some heavy resistance between 452 to 452.69 specifically. We got a big rejection here on SPY in the past many times at 452.69. So very, very good earnings. We're going to see SPY go all the way up to 452 possibly. If earnings are bad tomorrow, if we get a bad piece of earnings, if maybe the banks miss, or if they do decently, but guidance is very weak, if they tell us that things are going to get hard because of the recession and this and that, and the banks start falling, this could cause some bad price action for SPY. And SPY is going to come all the way down to 447 or so. And if it breaks below 447.5, we're going to be watching 447 flat. 446.25 could come next if we get a big drop. And we did get a rejection of 450.38, so we don't know which direction it's going to be in. So for SPY specifically, I know I'm going to give you predictions for other tickers, but for SPY, I don't really know how it's going to move, to be honest with you. The best thing to do is just wait for the earnings and be very patient, and we will see if this thing gaps up or gaps down. Make sure you are ready. Please be prepared for some big volatility. But for Tesla, I have another prediction that's different for SPY. So for tomorrow specifically, I don't know what Tesla's going to do because it depends on the earnings. Good bank earnings, and when I say good earnings, I'm referring to like strong guidance and like good numbers together overall. If we get that, Tesla's going to break 280, potentially push up to 282.8 to fill the gap, and maybe even 285. If we get bad earnings tomorrow from the banks, it's going to come all the way down to 275 to 274. If that fails us, watch 272. It's going to come all the way down to maybe like the mid to low 270s if that ends up being the case. All right, that's just for tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen for tomorrow, but for Tesla, I'm still quite bullish, and here's why. Now, tomorrow, whatever happens tomorrow, whether it comes down or up, it doesn't matter to me because going into next week, when Monday comes, we're going to see some upside for Tesla most likely. We're going to see a big surge in volume, lots of buyers stepping in because earnings is coming for Tesla, and Tesla tends to pump approaching earnings typically. It tends to pump up as we approach it. We tend to see a lot more volume. There's a good chance we're going to see some more aggressive buying because the expectation is going to be very good for it because it had the strongest deliveries report of all time for the company during this quarter, and Tesla might be reporting something very interesting. Who knows? So expect potential upside for Tesla going into next week, and we will see what happens for tomorrow based off all this data. For Aapl, good earnings tomorrow. We're going to be watching it break 191, this range right here. If it breaks that, it's going to make its way all the way up to 191.7 to potentially 192.5. This entire zone will likely be tested 191.7 to 192.5 if we get some strong earnings. There's a nice uptrend, so the odds do favor Aapl trying to hold up. But just to be safe, if earnings are bad tomorrow from the banks, Aapl is going to sink below 190 and retest 189.75. And if that fails us, 188.5 is a possibility. There is a bearish divergence on Aapl. So either way, I mean, it could go either way. Yeah, we'd have to be very careful with watching it. But the honest truth about Aapl is it's very indecisive and very tight right now. So it could go either way. But for the QQQ, very similar to SPY. We don't know which way it's going to go. We have some heavy resistance at 380. Good earnings is going to fly up to 382 plus and then potentially 384. If we get bad earnings, it's going to come all the way down to 377 and 376.4, which is very close to the 200 EMA. I'm going to be watching it carefully. We'll see what earnings cause. Nvidia is looking relatively strong, though. Let me just add that if we get bad earnings, we could see it come down to about like 455 or so. Strong earnings, this thing is going to fly up to about 470. What do I think is more likely? Well, from a technical standpoint, just based off technicals, it looks like Nvidia is starting to squeeze. It looks very, very bullish on the 4-hour time frame. It's just continuing to rip to the upside. It got this rejection off 450, but it ended up breaking above it. And this thing's continuing to fly. So there's a good chance it's going to try to go all the way up to 475 plus. There's a high probability of that looking at the current trend. It looks more bullish, but don't forget it, the bank earnings are going to have a big effect on it by the time it opens, and we will see how it moves. But right now, from a technical standpoint, it looks very bullish. I'm going to be watching this thing get to the 470s if it keeps going, depending on earnings. For Microsoft, this thing is looking optimistic as well, forming a potential cup and handle possibly as well, just about like right here. If this thing is bullish after the earnings, we're going to be watching this thing get above 345. If it breaks that, the next major resistance is going to be around 347, then 350. If it breaks down, if we get some bad earnings and things just don't go as planned, it's going to come all the way down, in my opinion, to 337 around there. And if it breaks below that, 335 could come. We're going to be watching this very carefully. I'm kind of in the middle with it, but from a technical standpoint, it's looking more bullish. It looks like it's going to try to make its way up higher, but you never know. You always need to be prepared just in case because earnings can be unpredictable. To add on to this, AMD, if we're bullish, we're going to see this thing fly up. I told you guys AMD was looking quite nice yesterday. It's also green for today. If we're really bullish, this thing has the potential to go all the way up to 118, which is where we have this imbalance like right here. If not, if it breaks down, watch 113.78, 112, and then 109 as supports. What do I think is more likely? Well, from a technical standpoint, it looks more bullish. It looks like it wants to retest 117 very soon. But just to be safe, we'll see what happens with the big earnings. For the NASDAQ, I would still be very patient. It did break above 14,000, which is a very bullish signal. But here's the thing. We'll see what happens with the earnings. Bad earnings, if it breaks below the 5 EMA, below 13,993 or 14,000, it's going to fill this gap and come all the way down to the lower 13,900s. And we could see some downside if we get some bad earnings. Strong earnings is going to keep going for 14,250. If SPY has the same thing, strong earnings, and we're going to see this, not SPY, sorry, SPX. If we get some strong earnings, we're going to be watching this thing go to 45, 25 plus, and then after that's going to come 45.50. That is also very possible if we get a very, very strong amount of earnings all the way up at this level. If we get a bad report of earnings and it breaks below our 5 EMA, which is going to be around 44.81, I'm going to be watching this thing make a move all the way down to fill this gap at 44.75. And if that fails us, there's a big gap down below here. So be very careful. Yes, we could see, whoops, sorry about that, guys. I apologize. I just had a glitch. If that ends up happening, It looks to me like this thing might get a rejection because we are forming a bearish divergence, and on top of this, it is a little bit overbought in a way, and we did get a rejection candle, a very small one off this 4-hour time frame, so it is possible. But I'm still kind of in the middle. I mean, these earnings are very hard to predict, so just be very careful. The VIX is also very undervalued. It's been just tanking and tanking and tanking. It's only at 13 right now. If you just look at it, it's continuing to decline over and over again. I can even delete this. I mean, no point of even drawing anything at this point. Uh, Still looking weak. There's not really a true sign of a bounce, but we do have this imbalance here. So maybe it does get a small bounce as the market corrects. There's a possibility. Not too sure though. There's not really a clear direction. It's still looking kind of weak. For Coinbase, this is a monster. This thing is currently at about 110. If it breaks 110, the level I was watching was 110 has the resistance right now. Get above that, and this thing's going to fly all the way up to about 114. That's the next major resistance. If it breaks 114, 116, the entire zone around 116 is where the next resistance is going to be, 116.55. If it breaks above that, it's going to make its way up to about 120 and then 125. This looks really bullish, by the way. Okay, it looks like this thing is going to squeeze. If it breaks 110 tomorrow, the earnings coming out tomorrow morning may affect it, but it looks like it's going to try to keep going. A lot of buyers are coming in after the SEC ruling, and there's a good chance we're going to see this thing go up to 120. But just to be safe, we'll see how the bank earnings affect it, but it is looking more bullish. Google's also looking more bullish now. If it keeps breaking out, watch 127 as resistance, then 130. If it comes down, watch this previous support as, or I'm sorry, this previous resistance as support right here around 123.3 and then 121.7. So these two zones are going to be our major supports, the previous highs we made during those pre-market levels. The 123 zone and the 121 zone are going to be our supports if this thing does break down, depending on the bank earnings. And below that, watch 120, 119, and then 117. For, excuse me, sorry guys. For Amazon, if we're bullish on Amazon, we're going to be watching this thing fly up to 136. If it breaks that, this thing may be well on its way to about 138. That is very possible for Amazon. It is looking more bullish as it got a breakout, but just to be safe, we have to see it break above our resistance. We called out this resistance at 134.7 in the past. If we're bearish because of the bank earnings, watch 132 and 130. It is looking more bullish. It looks like the odds favor this thing pushing for 136, but just to be safe, the bank earnings could be very, very capricious. Now for Meta, I told you guys this thing may see some downside. I remember I called that out yesterday, and it was very interesting because Meta, if you look at it, this is what Meta looked like today. It basically got this nice push up, it gapped up, and it came down. It saw a big move to the downside, going from 316 all the way down to about 310. Pretty big drop for its standards. It almost filled this gap, and then it got a nice bounce off of this, came right back up and slowed down over time. But now that Meta made the big drop after forming the bearish divergence and got a bounce, there's a good chance that the drop was already in and this thing may try to continue going. If it breaks 316, we're going to be watching 320, then potentially 325 after that to fill the gap. If it breaks below 310, well, 312 and then 310, that's going to be your bearish signal. It's going to come all the way down to 307. Now, looking at the 4-hour time frame, okay, this thing is well above our 50 EMA, which was holding us up for quite a while. So we saw this thing squeeze a bit. In my opinion, it's still looking quite decent, but the bank earnings could affect how it moves. So if we get some bad earnings, it's going to come down to maybe like 310. If it breaks below that 309, 307, and etc. are going to come. If we get strong earnings, we could see this thing bounce and go all the way up to 320. I'm not too sure about this. It is losing some momentum on the 4-hour time frame, but anything could happen with Meta as so many buyers could still step in. We'll have to wait and see tomorrow. It all depends on the earnings. All right, so with that said, thank you all so much for listening. We will see what happens with earnings for tomorrow. Thank you for listening. I want to keep this video kind of short and just be ready. It's going to be very big. I gave you guys some predictions on some of the tickers, but I did the best I could, so we'll see what happens. All right, thank you for listening. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Market to the moon as the long term is very bright, and peace out.